The Cathedral chapter is pleased to welcome you to the Metropolitan Cathedral of Oviedo.
Здравейте,
The
приятели!
cathedral is also known as the Sancta Ovetensis, in reference to the many important holy relics that are kept here. The cathedral is consecrated to Jesus Christ the Saviour and to the 12 apostles. It is the primary church of the diocese and the seat, or cathedra, of the bishop of the diocese. Above all, this cathedral is a place for prayer, where Christian believers congregate in order to celebrate the sacred rites of their faith. Over the centuries, the cathedral has been enriched with the addition of sculptures, altarpieces, paintings, and other devotional objects used in the process of liturgical worship. King Alfonso II of Asturias, known as Alfonso the Chaste, ordered the construction of the cathedral towards the end of the 8th century. Born in Oviedo in the year 760, Alfonso was a very devout man and commissioned the cathedral after moving his court to the city of his birth. In the cathedral records, he was often referred to as His Most Pious Majesty King Alfonso. Between the 8th century and the 18th century, the cathedral was successively extended, with the addition of pre-Romanesque, Romanesque, Gothic, and Baroque structures. The cathedral faces east to allow the morning light to illuminate the main altar. The building material is mostly limestone, brought from local quarries. Now look up at the stained glass windows. They were originally produced around 1510 by Diego de Santillana and Francisco de la Somoza, two master craftsmen from the city of Burgos. They are designed in the Hispano-Flemish style and are similar to those of the cathedral in Leon. Following the installation of the main altarpiece between 1512 and 1531, the windows in the first part of the apse were blocked off, although those in the second story remain visible. In 1934, during a period of civil unrest, the Holy Chamber was blown up, and several years later the bombardment that took place during the Spanish Civil War caused grave damage to the stained glass windows. However, they were later reconstructed. The versions we can see today date back to the middle of the 20th century and are the work of the master craftsman Santos Cuadrado. If we look towards the windows at the front, up above the main altar, we can identify Christ the Saviour, the Apostles, and a number of other saints, such as Saint Eulalia and Saint Louis. If we look over to the right, towards the windows of the south nave, we can see images of saints, pilgrims, apostles, bishops, and kings. Now let's look to our left. In the north nave, there are various scenes from the history of Asturias, such as the Synod of 812, which made Oviedo the seat of the bishopric, the opening of the Holy Ark on the 13th of March 1075, the founding of the city of Oviedo, and the construction of its monuments during the reign of King Ramiro, the Battle of Covadonga, and the landing of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V in the port of Tazones. Many sections from the original glass windows have been reused, albeit in no particular iconographical order, in the 3 rose windows located at the cardinal points. Now look behind you. Above the main entrance there is a splendid organ, which was made by Aquilino Amezua in 1906 and restored by the Spanish Organ Society after the end of the Spanish Civil War. The original pre-Romanesque basilica was extended with the addition of the central nave we are currently observing. Beyond the central nave, we have the side naves, from which we can see the various chapels, many of which are funerary in nature. Let's take a closer look at the chapel of St. Barbara, which is to the left of the main entrance. This chapel was built during the 17th century to house the holy relics, although ultimately they were never transferred from the Holy Chamber. The chapel is dedicated to St. Barbara, the patron saint of the cathedral's tower, and it is used early each morning by the cathedral chapter for Holy Mass.
Using your audio guide is very simple. To listen to a commentary, simply enter the number shown on the information panel or on your map, then press the green play button. Now go over to the main altarpiece. When you are there, press 2 and then play on your...
Let's take a moment to admire the Flemish Gothic altarpiece that presides grandly over the cathedral. It is a truly breathtaking work of art and religious devotion. Commissioned by Bishop Ordóñez de Biaquirán in Burgos in 1511, work began the following year in 1512. The project was overseen by Giralte de Bruselas, a master craftsman from Brussels in Belgium. The chief sculptor was Juan de Balmaceda, who delegated much of the carving work to Guillermo de Holanda and Esteban de Amberes. Let's take a moment to admire the believed to be the work of Balmaceda himself. The carving was completed in the spring of 1517. The structure of the altarpiece is made of chestnut, while nearly all of the sculptures are carved from walnut. Its overall dimensions are 16 meters tall by 11 meters wide. In 1522, Alonso de Berruguete was commissioned to paint and gild the altarpiece, for which he was paid 2,200 ducats. However, the project had to be suspended following a devastating fire, and the cathedral chapter was eventually forced to compensate Berruguete as a result of having cancelled the contract. Eventually, Leon Picardo, a Flemish artisan living in Burgos, was hired to complete the work. He began in 1529, and with the assistance of Miguel Bingeles, he managed to finish the altarpiece in May 1531, for which he was paid the sum of 2,500 ducats. Along with the altarpieces in the cathedrals of Seville and Toledo, this is one of the largest and most important structures of its kind anywhere in Spain. It depicts episodes from the lives of Jesus and Mary, presented in a clear chronological order. Beneath the altarpiece is the new choir from 1902, which was commissioned after Bishop Ramón Martínez Vigil decided to remove the choir from the central nave. The old seating could not be used, as it was too tall.
Later on in the tour, we will be able to see part of the old choir.
The altarpiece depicts the three main cycles in the life of Jesus Christ. Moving from bottom to the top and going from left to right, there are 23 scenes, representing the most important episodes from the lives of Christ and the Virgin Mary. Starting at the bottom left, we have the Annunciation, the visitation of the Virgin Mary to her cousin St. Elizabeth, the birth of Christ, and the adoration of the Magi. The figures in the center, flanking the bishop's chair, represent St. Peter and St. Paul. Between each scene, there are representations of the four fathers of the Roman Catholic Church: St. Ambrose, St. Augustine, St. Jerome, and St. Gregory the Great. At either end, there are images of St. Sebastian and St. Roch, who are traditionally invoked against the plague, and with whom the city of Oviedo has been linked since the Great Plague of 1598. In the second row of scenes, we can make out the presentation of Jesus at the temple, the flight into Egypt, Jesus among the doctors, and Jesus baptized in the River Jordan by St. John the Baptist. In the third row, we have the temptation of Christ, the conversion of water into wine, the resurrection of Lazarus, and Christ's entry into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. Look closely at the scene of Jesus turning water into wine. There should be 6 water jugs, but in fact, there are only 5.
This is a humorous reference on the part of the artist to the water jug that is on display here at the cathedral, and which we will see later on in the tour.
In the fourth row of the altarpiece, we have Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, the flagellation, the crown of thorns, and Christ carrying the cross. The scenes in the fifth row include Christ's resurrection, the appearance to St. Thomas, Christ's ascension into heaven, and Pentecost. In the central section of the altarpiece, starting at the bottom, we have Christ the Savior, or the incarnation of Jesus after he was resurrected. He is flanked by the symbols of the 4 evangelists: St. Matthew, St. Mark, St. Luke, and St. John, who bore witness to Christ's works and spread the Christian word throughout the world. In the center, we have the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. Here, she is accompanied by Bishop Ordóñez de Villequirán, who commissioned this altarpiece. At the top of the central section, crowning the altarpiece and serving as the culmination of the redemptive journey, we have Christ on the cross. Additionally, distributed elsewhere throughout the altarpiece, there are a further 60 figures, including apostles, prophets, kings, and biblical judges. Essentially, the altarpiece acts as a summary of the story of humankind's salvation through the works of Jesus Christ, the Son of God made flesh.
Now walk over to the right of the main altarpiece, where the signs will direct you to the Holy Chamber. When you have reached the anteroom to the Holy Chamber, press 3 and then play on your audio guide.
We are in the anteroom to the Holy Chamber, where for centuries the Holy Shroud was on display. We will shortly enter the most important part of this building, the Holy Chamber, which serves as the cathedral's grand reliquary. The chamber was created to honor St. Michael the Archangel. It was built in the pre-Romanesque style during the reign of King Alfonso II, towards the end of the 8th century. In 1985, it was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. The Holy Chamber is located on the right-hand side of the cathedral's apse. It is laid out like a martyrium, which is a type of early Christian structure comprised of 2 stories. On the bottom story, there is the crypt of Saint Leocadia, which contains funerary remains, and on the floor above, there is a reliquary, which constitutes the Holy Chamber proper. From its earliest days, Oviedo has been linked to the Camino de Santiago, or the Way of St. James. During the apogee of the Romanesque era, this link enabled the city of Oviedo to overcome its isolation from the rest of Europe.
Now go down the steps to the Holy Chamber, opposite the stairs by which we came up.
We are now crossing St. Michael's Tower. Hanging on the walls are portraits of 4 kings of Asturias who have a particular connection to the Holy Chamber. Pelagius, who was the first king of Asturias and launched the Christian reconquest of Spain. Fruela I, who ordered the construction of the original cathedral that stood on this spot, and which was also dedicated to Christ the Saviour and the 12 apostles. Alfonso II, who built the Holy Chamber to house the holy relics brought from the mountain of Monsacro, and Alfonso VI, who was present at the opening of the Holy Ark. The portraits were painted by Carlos García Muñiz during the 19th century.
Now let's find out more about the relics and treasures that are kept in the Holy Chamber. Please press 4 and then play.
The first part of the Holy Chamber, where the relics are kept, dates back to the pre-Romanesque era, around the end of the 8th century. In the 12th century, during the time of Bishop Pelagius, the chamber was extended and its original wooden covering replaced with a barrel-vaulted roof, with 3 ribbed arches resting on double columns. Outside, the roof is supported by buttresses, which are attached to the wall and incorporate rounded arches, similar to those of the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela and the columns of pre-Romanesque Asturian architecture. Over time, the additional structures we see today were added around the Holy Chamber, both surrounding it and protecting it. Upon entering the Holy Chamber, we are met by the magnificent Romanesque sculptures of the Apostles, carved into the pillars on each side. They are presented in pairs, each figure conversing with the other. Here, the Apostles are quite literally the columns that hold up the Christian faith. This remarkable set of carvings is comparable to the Portico of Glory at the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela and the Portico of Paradise at the Cathedral of Orense. As we enter, with the relics ahead of us, to our right are St. Thomas and St. Bartholomew. Look closely at the eyes of St. Thomas. They are blue sapphires, a reminder that he was the apostle who had to see Christ's resurrection before he believed it. To the left of the entrance are St. Simon and St. Jude, and in the center, over to the right, are the apostles St. Peter and St. Paul. On the column's capital, an angel is showing the empty sepulchre to a group of holy women. In front of us are St. James, with a scallop shell alluding to the Camino de Santiago, and St. John, with an eagle at his feet and the gospel in his hand. On the column's capital, from left to right, we can make out the Holy Family, the Annunciation, the wedding of the Virgin Mary and St. Joseph, and the harrowing of hell over to the right. On the column over towards the right-hand corner are St. James the Lesser and St. Philip, with hunting scenes and mythical animals on the column's capital. On the column over towards the left-hand corner are St. Andrew and St. Matthew, with Christ Pantocrator on the column's capital, surrounded by the apostles. The sacred enclosure lies beyond the gate. In the center of the room is the Holy Ark, which formerly housed the Holy Shroud, a linen cloth that covered the face of Christ after his death. The Holy Shroud bears traces of the blood of Christ, a relic of his passion and resurrection, and over the centuries has drawn many thousands of pilgrims to the cathedral. Each year, on Good Friday, and at the beginning and end of the Feast of the Cross, on the 14th and the 21st of September respectively, the Holy Shroud is placed on the main altar and solemnly presented to the congregation. Nowadays, the shroud is kept in a special display case with a controlled atmosphere. The case stands in the center of the Holy Reliquary and is normally covered for reasons of conservation, although a facsimile of the shroud is usually on display. However, the original shroud is placed on continuous display during Easter and Holy Week, and for the Feast of the Cross, which begins with the exaltation of the Holy Cross on the 14th of September and ends with the feast day of St. Matthew on the 21st of September. Ahead of us, in the center of the room,
Приятели, поздрави от катедралата на Светия Спасител в Овiedo.